All right, so we're working on another example where we're going to solve 2/3 times n plus 6 is equal to 10. And so first thing we need to do is take care of our parentheses. So in other words, we have 2/3 times n, so that's the same thing as 2/3 n times n. And then we have 2/3 times 6, so this is the same thing as saying 2/3 times 6 or 6 over 1, okay? Now we're going to try to simplify our fractions. Remember, you can use cross multiplication. So 6's and 3's can both be divided by 3, right? So 6 divided by 3 gives me 2. 3 divided by 3 gives me 1, right? So the 6 will now become a 2. The 3 will now become a 1. And then if I look at the 2 and the 1, I cannot reduce those, right? So 2 times 2, that gives me 4. And then 1 times 1 gives me 1. So this is the same thing as 4 over 1, or we could simply just say 4. Okay. Remember now at this point in math, you should be able to use your calculator if you needed to. But if you know how to do it without using a calculator, I really think it's just going to help strengthen your math skills. All right. So we have 4. And now I need to figure out, is this a positive or a negative 4? So we have a positive 2/3 positive n, that becomes a positive 2/3 n. Positive 2/3 times a positive 6, that becomes a positive. And then we're going to be equal to 10. So this is what our expression looks like simplified. I'm going to just take this out. We're done with this. All right, so now I'm looking at my variable. I see that it's not isolated. So I know that I'm going to use PEMDAS in reverse order. N is not by itself because it's being multiplied by 2/3. And I noticed that we're also adding 4. So remember, if you're adding or subtracting, you need your result to become 0. So I'm going to start off with the addition, use the inverse operation, which is subtraction. And now I'm left with 2/3 n. And 4 minus 4, that becomes 0. And then that is going to be equal to 6. Okay. So now I see that we are multiplying by 2/3, right? So 2/3 times n, how can I get that to become 1? Well, remember, if you're multiplying a fraction, in this case, I have 2/3. If you multiply by its reciprocal just basically means now it's going to be 3/2. Watch what happens. 2 times 3 becomes 6. 3 times 2 becomes 6. So this becomes 1, right? So if you multiply by its reciprocal, you'll end up with 1. So I'm going to just multiply by the reciprocal, which is 3 over 2, or 3/2 on both sides. Now, when I do that, notice what happens. 3 divided by 3, that becomes 1. 2 divided by 2 becomes 1. So we're left with n is equal to, this is the same thing as saying 6 or 6 over 1 times 3/2. Okay. And I am going to use cross multiplication to see if I can simplify. So let me see. Uh, so we have, well, not cross multiplication. I'm just going to cross cancel. Sorry. Cross cancel. So we have 6 and 2. I know that both of them can be divided by 2. So 6 divided by 2 will give me 3. And 2 divided by 2 will give me 1. Okay, so my 6 now becomes a 3. My 2 now becomes a 1. So now it looks like I have 3 times 3, which is 9, and 1 times 1, which is 1. Or I could just simply say this. N is going to be equal to 9. Okay. Now, this is how we would solve this one, but I am going to show you the other way that I told you before in terms of how it took me the longest time to be able to see the reciprocals of fractions to turn them into 1. So let me show you that other one. And if this one worked for you, you can stop the video. However, if you're still stuck on the fractions, go on and continue watching. All right, so let's go back to our original problem. Actually, I have a paper here. So we had 2/3 times n plus 6, and that is going to be equal to 10. Okay, and so now again, we still need to simplify this. So this is the same thing as saying 2/3 times n. So that would be like saying 2/3 times n over 1, right? So 2 times n would give me 2 n's. 3 times 1 gives me 3. And then we have 2/3 times 6. So again, 2/3 times 6 or 6 over 1. We can cross cancel still. So we see a 6 and a 3. So I know I can divide both of them by 3. And 6 divided by 3 gives me 2. 3 divided by 3 gives me 1. So this becomes 2. This becomes 1. All right, so 2 times 2 gives me 4. And then 1 times 1 gives me 1. So that's a whole number 1, right? So we have plus 4 is going to be equal to 10. Okay, so we've simplified our equation. Now we notice that our variable is not isolated. Why? Because it's being multiplied by 2, it's being divided by 3. In addition to that, we're also adding 4. So we need to undo all those operations, okay? So again, we're working our way back. Well, let me just put it over here. PEMDAS, I'll throw that over here. In fact, I'll erase all of this. We're finished with this now. So we know that we're talking about PEMDAS, but in reverse order. Okay. All right. And our result for addition or subtraction on the side that has the variable, we need that to become 0. And if we multiply and divide, we need that result to become 1. All right. So first things first, let's start with our addition. We're going to subtract 4 from both sides. And then I'm left with 2 times n divided by 3. And that is going to be equal to 6. Okay. So I noticed that my n is still not isolated because we're multiplying by 2 and we're dividing by 3. So we're continuing to work our way up. So we do see division, right? So now we need to use the inverse of division, which is going to be multiplication. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. So in other words, 3 is a numerator, right? Or 3 over 1. That's the same thing as how you're looking at it, right? So I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. And by doing that, 3 divided by 3, that cancels out. Now we're left with, that doesn't really cancel out. It just means that it becomes 1, which is what we want. But I always say cancel out. So we have 3 divided by 3, that becomes 1. And we're left with 2n is going to be equal to 18. All right, is the variable by itself? No, it's not, because we see that it's being multiplied by n. So now I'm going to divide both sides by 2, right? So now we're left with 2 divided by 2. That gives me an n is equal to 9. So this is another way to look at it. Now that I understand about the fractions and the reciprocals become 1, I will probably use this one. But if you are still struggling with being able to see that fractions in their reciprocal form becomes 1, feel free to use it in this way. Either way, you're going to come out with the same answer. N is equal to 9.